on a mountaintop in Tennessee. Greenest state in the land of the free. Raised in the woods so he knew every tree. Killed him a bar when he was only 3. Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier.
Hello, class, and today, as I promised you, we're going to get a chance to meet one of the most famous frontiersmen of all time, the most famous man in Texas history, more than likely, and it's this fella, Colonel David Crockett of Tennessee. So we'd like to welcome him, and we're going to give him a few questions. So, Colonel Crockett, before we throw questions at you, why don't you just kind of introduce yourself to the folks?
Well, my name is Davy Crockett. I'm half horse, half alligator, with a little bit of the snapping turtle thrown in just for spice. I got the surest rifle, the fastest horse, the prettiest sister, and the meanest dog in all of Tennessee. My old man can whip any man in the district, and I can whip my old man. I can jump the Mississippi, and I can ride a lightning bolt. But then again, that's not exactly true. That's what they would call the legend. My real name is David Crockett, Esquire, lately a congressman from the canebrake of Tennessee. As I went through my life, these stories grew up about me. And ever since then, there's always been these wonderful stories about Crockett. But what I'm here to tell you about today is the truth. The man behind the legend, as it were. So, I understand, Professor, that your youngins have come up with some questions, so fire away.
All right. Kamari would like to know, what was your childhood like?
What was my childhood like? Well, I can tell you right now, it weren't anything like y'all's. I was born the 5th of 9 children to John and Rebecca Crockett. Growing up, we was almost as poor as church mice. I remember growing up, and my mom and pa owned a tavern, and I slept in the bed with 3 of my brothers. And by the time I was 8 years old, they handed me my first rifle so I could go out and hunt. I worked all my life. I was herding cattle before I was 12 years old. I worked for men. I did hard labor all through my childhood years and what you'd call your adolescence. So it wasn't the same as y'all. We didn't have no phones or video games or all that other kind of nonsense. No, it was hard to live on the frontier, and living on the frontier meant you had to work if you wanted to live.
All right. Ben asks, what was it like being king of the wild frontier?
Oh, I never, ever was king of the wild frontier. In fact, that term, that moniker they gave me was coined by a man named George Bruns, who wrote a song called The Ballad of Davy Crockett. It's that there Walt Disney fella in that famous TV show they done in the 1950s. I was just like everybody else, really. I had to hammer out a living. I hunted, tried to make a little money here and there, but wasn't very good at that. But along the way, though, the story started, and I just let him go.
All right. Annie asks, why did you kill bears, and where did you get that hat?
Why did I kill bears? Because bears was your chief instrument of survival back then. The bear was your source of food, was your source of clothing. Their skin was a source of warmth in the wintertime. Their bear grease, their oil, was a lubricant, and you used it to cook with. And of course, bear meat's what you ate. So basically, if you wanted to live in the woods in Tennessee, you killed bears. Now, this here hat that I'm famous for, I didn't start wearing until the year 1834. I never actually wore these things. These things, other than when it's cold like it is today, aren't very comfortable. But I got to tell you, in the 1830s, a playwright, a gentleman named James Capalding, wrote a play called Lion of the West. And an actor named David Hackett played a character named Nimrod Wildfire, based on me. And Nimrod wore a fancy buckskin outfit, and he wore a cougar skin hat. Well, I ain't gonna wear no cougar. That's too heavy. So I started wearing the coonskin hat because that's what folks wanted. I tried to give the people what they wanted. So to move my image along, as it were.
All right. Shelby asks, did you have any kids or family?
Yes, I did. When I was a younger man, I married the love of my life, Miss Polly Finley. oh, we was a happy couple, and we had 3 boys and a girl. Well, unfortunately, the good Lord decided to take her in 1815. I was devastated. But but my youngins needed a ma, so I married a woman named Elizabeth. Now Elizabeth was a wealthy widow, and I knew a little bit of money wouldn't have hurt it, so I married her. And she had kids of her own, and together we had 2 more kids of ours. Actually, 3 more, 2 boys and a girl. So I had a lot of kids, and you needed to have a lot of kids in those days because they helped you. They helped you do all the work. The kids, when you had kids, you had folks to help you cook, clean, hunt, and farm. That's one of the main reasons why we had so many.
All right. Sam asks, what was the most deadly disease of your time?
Deadly disease. Well, that would have had to have been a disease called cholera. And cholera was a disease that affected you. It would dehydrate you. We had a pandemic, as it were, in the year 1825. Started over in India, and it went around the world. And it killed millions of people. When it got over to the Americas, it hit hard. It hit down in Mexico. In fact, my old friend Jim Bowie's wife and her family was killed by cholera. So yeah, it was cholera.
All right. Aiden asks, are you a slave owner?
No. I did not ever own a slave. One reason is, well, we couldn't afford them. Second reason is, I just didn't see the reason to have no slaves. Now, Travis had slaves because he brought his slave Joe with him down to Alamo. And Colonel Bowie, aside from that big knife, he used to run slaves with his brother and used to work for a pirate named John Lafitte. So, but me, I had no use for slaves.
All right. Molly asks, what are you most famous for?
Oh my. Well, down here in Texas, it's dying at the Alamo. I'm famous for that. I'm famous for being an expert woodsman. You know, it's a known fact that I killed 105 bears with 104 bullets one winter, and that is true. But I'm famous for all them tall tales. But in reality, I'm famous for able to tell a good story. I'm famous for being a congressman that didn't really have an outstanding political career. But mostly, I'm famous for the things that you've heard of, the legend, as it were.
Josh asks, why did you come to Texas?
Why did I come to Texas? Now, if you watch them movies, it has me coming down here because I wanted to join the fight for liberty. But you know why I came to Texas? I came to Texas I left Texas in 1835 for the same reason so many others did. The reason why so many other people abandoned their houses and carved GTT on their front doors, gone to Texas. I came here to make a living, to make a name for myself. Land was cheap and plentiful. And a fella, if he played his cards right, could make a name for himself down here in Texas. Well, I was even thinking about maybe running for office again. This time, probably making it. And the biggest thing was making some money because I was never good at making no money. I was in debt all my life. So the reason I came to Texas was for that. Now, when I got down here, I discovered that I had to take an oath and join the Army. I joined the Army. Then they sent me down to San Antonio de Bejar, that there Alamo, and I didn't have any choice but to stay. Folks was counting on old Davy to be there for them.
All right. Jake asks, do you remember the Alamo, and what do you remember about the Alamo?
Do I remember the Alamo? Well, let me tell you, folks. Jake, it's not like anything you've seen in the movies. When we got in Alamo, it was a nice, warm day in 1836. It was shirt sleeve weather, but then a blue norther blew up, and by February 25th, 2 days after we got in there, it was cold. It was below freezing. It was rainy. We were in a place that had poor sanitation. We had cattle, but we ate them up. We run out of coffee. We were cramped in there together. It was cold, nasty. It was not a pleasant place to be. Plus, we was hiding behind the walls because Santa Ana was shelling the place with, as Travis put it, a continual bombardment and cannonade every day. So it was not a pleasant place to be, let me tell you.
Chris asks, if you had lived another 10 years after the Alamo, what did you hope to do with your life?
Well, to add on to what I said a little bit earlier, I was hoping by then I'd be part of the new Texas government, maybe even president. You know, old Sam Houston came down here and he became the first president. And I thought, you know, Sam Houston or Davy Crockett, I bet you the folks would have chose old Davy. And that's what I was hoping for, that I would be big man down here in this big land.
All right. Megan asks, if you could go back in time and change something, what would it be?
Oh, now first thing everybody's going to think is that not going to the Alamo. And let me tell you, once I got there and saw what it was all about, that was part of me that wanted to go over them walls. But I knew that I couldn't have done that. I think the thing, though, that I really wanted to change was going back to when I married my wife, Polly. I would have stayed home more. I was always out hunting, on hunting trips. And she died young, and I would have liked to have been able to have spent more time with Polly. She was the love of my life. And there hadn't been a day gone by since she passed that I hadn't missed her.
All right, and one last question. Ronan asks, what are you most proud of? What's your greatest achievement?
To be honest with you, that I'm so well remembered, even though most of what I remember for may not have happened the way the folks said it was, but I'm still remembered today. That folks remember the name of Davy Crockett. They remember that when they see the image of a fellow wearing a coonskin hat, they say that's Davy Crockett. That I'll always be remembered, and that I put my mark in the history of this great nation. Now, some of that history may have been embellished, but still I was part of it, and that's my greatest achievement. Is that like the Alamo, I'm remembered.
All right, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to tell the students, something to leave them with?
I'll leave with the students what I've always left with everybody. I had in my life what I call a personal motto, which is basically a mission statement, something I live by, and that was always, be sure you're always right, then go ahead. Meaning, youngins, be able to make good decisions, and when you think you're going to do the right thing, you go ahead and do it, despite what anybody else may say. You may get walloped for doing the right thing, but be sure you're right, then go ahead. You know.
All right, well, thank you very much, Colonel Crockett. We've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit.
I've enjoyed being here. God bless y'all.
Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier. Davy Crockett,